What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live and in living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Smarter? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you can have me at your next event, playing for you on the digital wheels of steel. Yes, I play music for people. And I do karaoke shows. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Use the hashtag #WhatMakesYouFamous to find it everywhere. Let's learn together on What Makes You Smarter. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, 10 things you need to know today for Monday, May 4th, 2020. May the 4th be with you. 10 things you need to know today. Number 1, Trump very confident of coronavirus vaccine by end of 2020. President Day participated in a virtual town hall with Fox News at the Lincoln Memorial, telling moderators Bret Baier and Martha MacCallum that he is, quote, very confident, end quote, that there will be a coronavirus vaccine by the end of the year. Quote, we'll have a vaccine much sooner rather than later, end quote. He claimed some health experts have warned it could take 18 months to have an effective vaccine ready. Trump's comments came after Sir John Bell, an immunologist at the Regis Chair of Medicine at the University of Oxford, said on NBC's Meet the Press that researchers would, quote, get a signal by June, end quote, about whether Oxford's highly anticipated coronavirus vaccine works. He said the, quote, prospects are pretty good, end quote. But if the vaccine works, it will probably not be a one-time vaccine, but a seasonal one that requires updates as the virus mutates. This is according to Fox News and NBC News. Number 2, parks, beaches crowded despite social distancing warning. Americans flocked to beaches and parks over the weekend against the advice of public health experts concerned about the spreading of the coronavirus. Dr. Deborah Birx, response coordinator for the White House Coronavirus Task Force, said on Fox News Sunday that it was not safe to go to the beaches unless everyone was respecting the social distancing standard of staying at least 6 feet apart. She also said it was a bad idea for some states to be allowing businesses such as spas and beauty salons to reopen in the first phase of efforts to resume normal economic activity, adding that it was, quote, devastatingly worrisome, end quote, that Michigan lockdown protesters gathering in crowds could spread the virus. The total number of confirmed U.S. coronavirus cases reached nearly 1.2 million, with nearly 70,000 deaths. This is according to Reuters. Number 3, Trump pushes back after Bush calls for unity in coronavirus fight. After former President George W. Bush released a video over the weekend calling for unity during the coronavirus crisis, President Trump on Sunday criticized Bush via Twitter. Quote, he was nowhere to be found in speaking up against the greatest hoax in American history, end quote, Trump wrote, referring to his impeachment. Trump also quoted a Fox News commentator who asked why Bush hadn't urged people to set aside partisanship during the impeachment. Bush had used his video to praise healthcare workers and others helping the nation face a, quote, shared threat, end quote. Quote, in the final analysis, end quote, Bush said, quote, we are not partisan combatants. We are human beings, equally vulnerable and equally wonderful in the sight of God. We rise or fall together, and we are determined to rise, end quote. This is according to USA Today. Number 4, Pompeo says there's enormous evidence virus emerged from China lab. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Sunday on ABC's This Week that, quote, there's enormous evidence, end quote, that the COVID-19 coronavirus came from a lab in China. President Trump has made the same claim, although U.S. intelligence agencies have said they've seen no evidence to support the theory that the virus somehow escaped from the Wuhan Institute of Virology in the city where the outbreak was first reported. Pompeo also accused the Chinese government of covering up early information about the outbreak. A Department of Homeland Security report viewed by the Associated Press said intelligence officials, quote, intentionally concealed the severity, end quote, of the outbreak so they could stock up on medical supplies before other countries did. This is according to the New York Times and the Associated Press. Number 5. Senate reconvenes as House members stay away. The Republican-led Senate reconvenes on Monday while the Democratic-led House remains in recess due to the coronavirus pandemic, reflecting a broader blue-red divide on continuing restrictions to curb the spread of the virus. President Trump welcomed the decision by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican Kentucky, to recall the Senate to Washington, even though the Congressional Physician's Office warned that it would be impossible to screen all senators for COVID-19. Republican senators said they would push for legislation to protect reopened businesses from liability lawsuits filed by people who might become infected. Democratic leaders have vowed to oppose blanket protections from lawsuits. The potential clash would mark a departure from the bipartisan approval of nearly $3 trillion in emergency bailouts for businesses and families struggling with the economic fallout from the pandemic. This is according to the Washington Post and The Guardian. Number 6. Northeast governors team up to buy ventilators, protective gear. The governors of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Delaware announced in a virtual news conference on Sunday that their states would work together to jointly purchase ventilators and protective gear such as masks and gloves needed to respond to the coronavirus crisis. Massachusetts and Rhode Island also will be part of the alliance. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, Democrat, said. The governor said that by working together, they would be able to get better prices and avoid getting into bidding wars against each other. Quote, "We will buy as a consortium, PPE, medical equipment, ventilators, whatever we need to buy," end quote, Cuomo said. In April, the 7 states agreed to coordinate their orders to permit businesses and public facilities to open. This is according to the New York Times. Number 7, Biden wins Kansas mail-in Democratic primary. Former Vice President Joe Biden has won Kansas's mail-in Democratic presidential primary, the state party announced Sunday. Biden, the presumptive nominee, received 77% of the ranked choice vote, earning him 29 of the state's delegates. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent Vermont, who has suspended campaigning but was still in the race during the vote, got 23% of the vote and earned 10 delegates. Biden now has 1,435 of the 1,991 delegates he needs to officially secure the nomination. More than 400,000 people cast ballots in the state. Only 36,000 people voted in the state's 2016 caucuses when Sanders beat Hillary Clinton. Quote, "We are confident the enthusiasm and engagement seen during the 2020 primary will only continue to grow and translate into Democratic victories up and down the ballot in November," end quote. Kansas Democratic Party Chairwoman Vicky Hyatt said in a statement. This is according to The Hill and CNN. Number 8, Boris Johnson reveals details of tough coronavirus fight. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson provided details Sunday about his fight with COVID-19, saying there was a point during his stay in intensive care, quote, "when it was 50-50 whether they were going to have to put a tube down my windpipe," end quote. If he had been intubated, he would have had to be placed in a medically induced coma. Quote, "It was a tough old moment. I won't deny it," end quote. The 55-year-old Johnson said in an interview with British newspaper The Sun, quote, "They had a strategy to deal with a death of a Stalin type scenario," end quote. Johnson credited the doctors and nurses of the United Kingdom National Health Service for his recovery. He added that his fiancée, Carrie Simmons, named their newborn son, Wilfred Lowry Nicholas Johnson, in honor of 2 of Johnson's physicians, Dr. Nick Price and Dr. Nick Hart. This is according to The Sun and NPR. Number 9, South Korea says Kim did not have surgery during absence. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, quote, "did not undergo surgery," end quote, during the 3 weeks in which he disappeared from public view, a South Korean official said Sunday. Kim's absence provoked intense speculation about his health and whereabouts, with some media outlets even saying he might have died or slipped into a vegetative state after a cardiovascular procedure. Then, on Saturday, Photos emerged apparently showing Kim attending a ribbon-cutting ceremony celebrating the completion of work on a fertilizer plant. Shortly after Kim's reported reemergence, North and South Korea exchanged gunfire at the demilitarized zone that separates the two countries. This is according to Reuters. Number 10. Pence says he should have worn a mask at Mayo Clinic. Vice President Mike Pence said Sunday during a Fox News virtual town hall that he should have worn a face mask in accordance with Mayo Clinic policy during his visit to the facility last week. Pence initially said that he didn't want to wear a mask because he was tested regularly and knew he wasn't infected, after reporters noted that he was the only person without a mask as he met with doctors, nurses, and coronavirus patients. He also responded to criticism by saying he wanted to look researchers and healthcare workers, quote, in the eye, end quote, and thank them for their work. On Sunday, he said, quote, I didn't think it was necessary, but I should have worn a mask at the Mayo Clinic, end quote. This is according to USA Today. That's 10 things you need to know today for Monday, May 4th, 2020. May the 4th be with you. Hope everyone's doing reasonably well. Drop me some comments. Let me know what you're up to. Also, if you'd like to tell your story or hear the stories of others, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag WhatMakesYouFamous. That's it for me. It's Keys Dan, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. Peace. I'm out of here. If you like what you hear, I encourage you to follow What Makes You Smarter on social media. Find it on Facebook at What Makes You Smarter, Instagram at What Makes You Smarter, Twitter at SmarterWhat, and YouTube, username Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Smarter podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Smarter podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. My personal favorite, learn with me on my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time for What Makes You Famous. Support What Makes You Smarter podcast using the PayPal, paypal.me/Keys Dan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Smarter is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening.